Sussex crash in slow motion. Meghan's spending spree makes Harry painfully bankrupt. It was just 2 weeks of seriously luxurious living, but it ultimately cost the fake Duke and Duchess so much more. You know, if the people who created The Crown ever wanted to make a new series based on the events that led up to Megxit, they would need an even bigger location budget than usual. They wouldn't only need to shoot scenes of people wearing beautiful wool suits feeling all kinds of feelings in drawing rooms full of worn chintz sofas and horsey bronzes, but they would also have to go to Sicily. They would have to be poolside by a luxurious south of France estate and somewhere that can mimic the beautiful blue waters of the Balearic Islands. Now, in some ways, the world is still coming to terms with Megxit. After all, it was the first voluntary royal resignation in modern history, and it is worth considering one part of their story that really gets passed over, and that is the role that Harry and Meghan's 11 days of luxury travel in August of 2019 played in encouraging them to walk away from their roles as working royals. Now, that 11 days was not cheap. According to reported figures from the time, the estimate for that trip was about $245,000. But the case can be made that in the end, Meghan and Harry paid a pretty high price for exercising their right to christen themselves in the Mediterranean. So it's July 2019, and things are not very good in the land of Sussexes, both in public and in private. It's already been a pretty eventful year, to say the least. Reports of Harry and Meghan acting up had surfaced months before, that she made Catherine, for example, cried, that Harry yelled, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets," the list goes on. And then in February, Meghan's fancy New York baby shower and exercise in celebrity gaucherie had resulted in her coming in for quite a beating. Side note here, of course, later on, Meghan claimed that it was Catherine who made her cry, but who can keep up? In April, Harry and Meghan finally moved into their new home, Frogmore Cottage, and then in June, there was that whole brouhaha in the media over the $4.6 million of sovereign grant money that was used to renovate the place. So the figure was actually less than the $7.7 million of grant money that was previously spent on William and Catherine's home, but still, that didn't stop them from coming in for criticism. The Sun reported at the time that the royal accounts show work on the couple's home has so far cost the public far more than original estimates, sparking fury from campaigners. Alright, no matter, the arrival of Harry and Meghan's first baby boy in May would be a source of joy and good press, right? Oh no, not quite. Instead, we got the micromanagement of the arrival of Archie that saw a press release go out announcing that Meghan had gone into labor hours after he had actually been born, which only ignited a whole new round of criticism. And that's because it looked like it was an intentional sleight of hand, and maybe it wasn't, but it really upset people. Now at the time, a colossal tech failure was blamed for the mess. And then in June, the news was finally confirmed after a lot of speculation that Meghan and Harry were leaving the Royal Foundation. That, of course, is a charitable umbrella organization they shared with William and Catherine, now the Prince and Princess of Wales. With this announcement, it was very difficult for Kensington Palace to try to spin this as anything but a clear indication that things were not good behind the scenes with the brothers and their wives. It was clear that they were not spending their time hanging out together, sharing some wine and some fun conversation. And then in July, Meghan went to Wimbledon with a couple of American friends. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, not so much. Things got pretty tricky when dozens of seats were left empty around the royal party, and attendees who were sitting nearby were told they were not allowed to photograph Meghan Markle, even though the event was broadcast on live TV. Never before or since then has a member of the royal family at Wimbledon gotten this kind of spare seat treatment. Then a few days later, baby Archofficial was christened, but noticeably absent from the christening were Her Late Majesty and Prince Philip. And then Meghan's guest-edited issue of British Vogue landed, and she chose 15 forces for change, including Greta Thunberg and Jacinda Ardern, to celebrate. And of course, it didn't look very good that she excluded her own boss and her grandmother-in-law, the late Queen. And then what Harry said to Jane Goodall about their plans to only have 2 kids for environmental reasons didn't go down very well either. Looking back, we can see that the events of the first half of 2019 were filled with mistakes. It's kind of like watching a train wreck in slow motion. And of course, now we all know that allegedly in private, Meghan's mental health had begun to fall apart. Later, she told Oprah, "I just didn't want to be alive anymore." And then Harry described coming home to find Meghan in a heap crying while breastfeeding their son. He told Winfrey, "I went to a very dark place as well." And so the stage was set for what, looking back, was something of the last straw. In late July, first Harry flew, supposedly via private jet and helicopter paid for by Google, to Sicily for Google's annual camp, and the Daily Mail claimed that he gave a barefoot speech about climate change. And then a few days later, Meghan and Archie and Harry flew to Ibiza, and they stayed in a luxury villa that supposedly cost anywhere from £25,000 to £108,000. Days later, after they came back to the UK, the family were off again, of course using private jet, and this time they enjoyed a little break at Elton John's South of France estate. At that time, The Sun reported that the cost of the jet, which was paid for by Elton John, would have been around £20,000. The press had an absolute field day with that information. Most obviously, Harry looked like a complete hypocrite for preaching about how the Earth is about to melt, which is true, and then taking 4 gas-guzzling private flights in just 11 days. Only in July, their Sussex royal account had posted, with nearly 7.7 billion people inhabiting this earth, every choice, every footprint, every action makes a difference. Well, okay, their attitude seemed to be pretty clear. Do as I say, not as I do. And the timing couldn't have been worse when Harry then launched Travelist, his eco-travel initiative, only a couple of weeks later. It was like making Keith Richards the face of sobriety, but looking back, it was not only the double standard that really bothered people, but also Meghan and Harry's apparent turn towards conspicuous consumption. What really got people upset was not only the staying in the villas and flying on private jets, but they seemed to be flouting one of the most important pretenses of the royal family, that while some of them are indeed ridiculously rich, they still avoid anything so crass as showing off or being seen to throw around money. It also looked increasingly like they were confusing royalty for celebrity. So by the time Meghan and Harry left the UK for their tour of Southern Africa in September, things had really reached a fever pitch. Within just a few weeks, Harry would announce that he was taking legal action against The Sun and the Daily Mirror's parent companies, that Meghan was suing the Daily Mail, and that they would be giving interviews to ITV's Tom Bradby that seemed to confirm that things were really pretty bad. And then not long after that, Meghan and Harry headed to Canada for a 6-week break, and they never really returned. Harry and Meghan have only spent short periods of time in Britain since then. Looking back, so much happened that August, didn't it? I mean, just imagine if Meghan and Harry hadn't gone away to Spain and France. Imagine if they instead had borrowed one of Charles's properties on the Cornish Isles of Scilly, or even his Welsh cottage. Maybe they could have found a nice break for themselves. Maybe they could have found some peace. And maybe some of that pressure could have been siphoned off in all that clean, beautiful country air. Or just imagine if they had taken Her Late Majesty up on her reported offer of a stay at Balmoral. What may have happened if they had a chance to speak for a long time to the late Queen? If Harry and William had a chance to have a few nice long walks together where they really let it all out? Could the pain and the grievances that would push Harry and Meghan towards their quitting somehow have been addressed up there in the Highlands? But instead of taking what now appears to be the final opportunity for them to vent, to share, and to have their concerns heard, especially by the late Queen and Charles, Meghan and Harry decided to take themselves off on this nice vacation, and then it triggered a fresh round of denunciations. Well, if only we had a time machine, if only the royal family had a better sense of how close to imploding Meghan and Harry were at the time and had done something sooner. If only Meghan and Harry had the confidence that some kind of good arrangement could be discovered with Buckingham Palace and hadn't decided to just throw their toys out of the pram. If only. But there is another thing that we can say from this point, 4 years down the road. The firm would be in a much stronger and better position now if they were still on the books. And you, do you agree with this view? If yes, please like and share my video with your friends and relatives who need it anytime you want. And don't be afraid to click the subscribe button to get more updates in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in, have a lovely weekend, and we'll be back to see you all tomorrow.